Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. My name is Moria Cassis. I'm the founder and general manager of Product League. Our program is a 4-month long mentoring program for product managers by product managers. Today's session is a webinar brought to our mentors to support them on the important mission they signed on, or as we chose to name this webinar, You Can Change Lives. Our speaker for today is Chedva Kleinhandler. Chedva is the CEO and co-founder of Emerj. A platform provides corporations with the opportunity to utilize the talent and variety of experts work in the company to support other employees at the company and mentor them. We will discuss best practices for mentoring, how to give back without compromising your life and time, and how being a mentor can prepare you for the next step in your own career. We would love to hear from you, so please listen, engage, and ask questions. A recorded version of this webinar will be provided and available soon and will be shared on our website and social media. Chedva, it's an absolute pleasure having you here with us. How are you?
And the pleasure is all mine. I'm super excited for this. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And thanks, Maria, for having
Amazing.
me.
Absolutely happy to have you here with us. We're friends for quite a time,
Yeah.
mostly online, but also offline. And when this opportunity to have a webinar for our mentors came, I knew you are just the right person to have this with us. So
Thank
thank
you
you for
so much.
joining us. Pleasure, and the stage is yours.
Hi, mentors. I'm really excited to do this and was really, really excited when Maria told me all about the Product League program and what you've been doing with your mentees. I've been working in the space of mentoring tech for almost 4 years. Founded Emerj 2 years ago, and still it never ceases to amaze me is that people who are busy, who have their own lives, maybe they're also looking for their own mentor in some capacities, still take their precious time and efforts and thoughts and just contribute it to someone else that maybe they never even met or known a lot of things about. So kudos to you. Feel free to pat yourself on the back. As Mona said, I thought it would be really interesting, at least from my perspective, what I see every day when we're working with Fortune 500 companies and the mentors and mentees inside them, to discuss a little bit about what makes a successful mentorship. What do you get out of the mentorship? What are the expectations as in anything in life, and especially when we're volunteering? Setting expectations is so crucial, and a lot of times the mentor and the mentee come into the room with different expectations, or maybe we don't even know what the expectations are. So let's start. And as Moya said, I would love for you to be very Israeli and interject with questions, with comments. I'll try to also get to beyond myself, and after every topic dedicate some time, but if you see I'm forgetting that, feel free to just jump in. Okay, so let me begin by just telling you a little bit about what brought me to this world and what's my perspective, so you can take it with a grain of salt or not. So I'm Chedva. Emerj is my third business, my first startup. I didn't work in large organizations before, but I did work with them, consulting them. I started my first business at 21. I went to school for translation and editing. Yeah, I know, very, very far from what I do today. And what I discovered was that while I was a great translator, I was a bookworm and loved writing, reading, and anything that had to do with it. Still, I was really good at my job, but my job was so much more than actually doing my job. My job was about negotiating, was about networking, about positioning myself, about knowing what to do when a client doesn't pay on time. And for that, I needed to learn from others, because that's nothing that you learn at school. And at that point, I was sure that I'm the only person in the world that needed mentoring. I didn't even know that that's what it's called. But later on, the years went by, and probably a lot of you can familiarize with that. I understood that actually a lot of people are coming for me for mentoring and advice. And one of the things that really was very disturbing and surprising for me to understand is that it's not only us, people who work from home or from coffee shops, who don't have a lot of people surrounding them, or maybe are just beginning to build their networks, that need that access to mentorship, to advice, to support. But actually even people in very large organizations that are surrounded by thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of people every day, people with knowledge and experience, and I want to believe that the goodwill to also share them, still feel that they don't have the access, or they don't know how to go about it. Do they ask for an intro? What happens then? They sit in a room, they have coffee. What do they speak about? Do they ask a question? Do they wait for the person to tell them their career story? Is it okay to ask for favors? Is that the context? And that set me out in the path of creating Emerj, which is an internal platform inside organizations where every employee, not only the highly networked ones, can really find mentors that are contextualized. So people who already know the organizational culture and sort of have been there in their career path a step or two before, or maybe are even younger, but have more knowledge on the specific topic that they want. And this brings me to talking about what is mentoring, because I think we all have like this picture of mentoring, right? Like Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting, a Yoda figure. I don't know if you've seen Mona Lisa Smile, but Julia Roberts kicks ass there as a mentor. So that's like a bigger than life lesson, nothing really specific mentor. But I don't know, I've had a lot of mentors, and some of them I've only met once in my life. So is mentorship only a process of like 4, 6, 12 months? Or can it be also something that is one-off? That's a big question, right? And I do think that mentoring comes in all shapes and forms. And I think it really depends on what you need. And let's take a look on what people need. There's a really great Wharton study, a little bit old, from quite a few years ago, that really went into mentoring and understood what do people need, what do people want. Maybe it's not the same thing. What are the outcomes for the people? And a lot of times when we're talking about mentoring programs, also the organization that they work at. And let me read from so I'm not flabbing it. Let me see. Okay. Are you hearing any metals? Because I think maybe my necklace is making some noise. So let me know in the chat. Okay, so people are looking, according to Wharton, for a few things. Since the beginning of time, it used to be that our mentors were just our bosses, right? Our supervisors. They were the ones that we relied on for guidance, for support. But the problem is, first of all, sometimes the goals of that mentorship are not necessarily what the organization or what the boss also wants, right? Especially if the company is now laying off people and I want to get a raise, it's not necessarily, it might clash, right? So that's one thing. Another thing is that sometimes I need guidance and mentorship on how to deal with my boss, right? And I want an outside perspective. So that's a big thing. There's not a lot of people who are so lucky to have a boss who's also a mentor. And what people are looking for is a few things. A sounding board. It's a place they can be actually truthful and honest and be vulnerable at, which is, I think, a big, big change from the corporate culture of just until like 10 years ago, right? We really appreciate independence. That's like Americans say, independence is strength and interdependence is weakness. And we've all been in situations in our careers that if you don't have someone you can be radically honest with and really open up and be vulnerable, then you'll not get the advice or strategy that you really need to go forward. If you're going to meet a mentor and you're actually going to network with them and to strategize on how you can impress them and maybe sell something to them, whether that you're selling them your product or you're selling them you as a professional that they need to hire, then it's going to be effective maybe in some points, but I think first of all the mentor will call the bluff, and also it won't be an effective mentoring. It won't get you where you want to go with your career path. So we need a place that's a sounding board that You can be completely radically honest and vulnerable, and you need to get real feedback. You need to open up and also be able, beyond being yourself honest and maybe telling your side of the story, also hearing the mentor and internalizing it, whether you end up taking the advice or not. If you don't listen, then it's all pretty null, right? And then a really interesting thing that Wharton says about effective mentorship is that effective mentors have the knowledge of the career path that the mentee is on or on the way to. So they actually know the context, whether it's inside the organization, which is what we do a lot, but it's not necessarily, whether it's inside the organization where you know the organizational culture, you know sort of the hierarchy, the politics, the power plays, or whether it's outside, but in the same industry, like you're doing in Product League, right? So that's really, really important. And we can go into the numbers of how effective it is, but I think that's quite boring and off topic, but definitely happy to go back to it. So looking at that and looking at some of the questions that, I've spoken with Maria and said, what are the topics that keep popping up? I have a few ideas on what we should focus on. One of the things is, okay, you've done you've made your step. You decided to be a mentor. You volunteered your time. You dedicated the time, and you stepped up, right? And you got an amazing mentee, but you have a few hours, a couple hours a month, maybe. What do you do with that time? And the answer is that there is no answer, because mentoring is no longer, you can't preach, you can't, play Yoda. But the happy part about it, the good news is that actually time does not necessarily mean that it's more effective. The effectiveness means that your mentee comes prepared, that you set expectations at the beginning, that you know what they're looking for. And that's something I think a lot of times we don't do, because it feels to us like something we do with maybe the people that we manage at work and not something that we do with our mentees. So that's a really, really important first step. First of all, to know that you're on the same page. It's, there's nothing easier than that. It's not rocket science, but sometimes it's quite hard, right? So just understanding what the mentee needs and wants out of this, and what you feel like you can offer. Because I don't know if you can promise a person they'll get a job after a mentorship program. Of course, you'll do everything that you can to help them, but you can promise them, right, that you'll work together on their strategy for getting their first job or their first managerial job, right? Or you can promise them that you can help them work on becoming better product leaders, or on hiring better, or a myriad of other things. So that's, first of all, setting expectations and understanding how you're going to spend your time. The second thing is, so a lot of the times, 75% of what you've said and what happened would be, I don't want to say meaningless, but would be less meaningful. But then the one thing that you said would stick with that person and will drive a lot of change and a lot of impact. So don't feel bad about the fillers. You can never know, and you can never imagine what it would be that would drive the impact. So just be there, be present, be engaged. Set expectations, and the rest is very much up to you, but also up to your mentee if they're up to listening and opening up and really sort of absorbing what's happening there. So that's one thing. A lot of times I get to the question of, okay, I have some experience, maybe a lot of experience. I even get, I know that I'm a good manager. I've worked very hard to get to this point. I may be considered a leader in my company or in my industry, or, a thought leader. But what can I give a person? Why should they come to me and not to their boss? So first of all, as we said just a few minutes ago, a lot of times it's not, the goals of the boss or of the organization and the goals of the mentee sometimes are opposed, or not opposed, but they're not directly aligned, and that's a problem. And it's a problem for the mentee, but they can have a lot of different people to go to. Another thing that I see a lot is that you would want to get a different perspective. Just to give you an example, we work with a few companies in tech, but also in finance and automotive. So it's very like industry agnostic, and we see it coming up again and again. And we see people who say, okay, this is my question. And by the way, for us, it always starts with a question. And I'll go into it later into what do you do? Like, should you be setting the topics of the conversation, or should your mentee, etc.? But then they get a list of people. Someone might be the best friend of their boss. Someone might be someone they run into in the cafeteria. And it's always a decision. Maybe you want someone from the context of your specific location, your specific department, your specific even team, because they have the whole context. They've been there in the meetings. They know the people. Maybe you can trust them because you already know them, and you know that they'll be discreet. On the other hand, sometimes you can't, you feel it's too close to home. So you want anyone but here. But even then, you want to know, okay, do I want a perspective of someone who's not from a location, or who's from my department or from my industry? Do I want someone who's not necessarily from very specifically from the subcategory of what I do, but someone who really knows the culture where I am? A lot of times with salespeople, we see, okay, I actually want someone specifically, not from the culture that I'm part of, but the culture of my clients. And I think with product, you can see it a lot, because you're all about negotiating between R&D and the business. So maybe you want someone from business or from R&D, so you can really get in their heads and really understand how to communicate yourself to them on that challenge that you have. Or you want someone from a different location, because you want to understand how the engineers in India think that you're working with. And another thing, yet again, to take into perspective is that we say, like, I really see mentoring as sort of an umbrella to a lot of different types of knowledge sharing. So for us, mentoring is sort of a conversation, but maybe a more effective kind of mentoring for this case, for your mentee or for yourself in specific situations, is actually job shadowing, having them hop on a call or a meeting that you're doing that's actually going to help them learn from you by observing. Another form of mentoring, which is not being spoken enough about, is sponsoring. Also, sponsoring is a lot of times not relevant. How many of you know what sponsoring is in the context of mentoring? Want to say yes in the chat real quick? Okay, so sponsoring means that over 70% of the decisions about your career, a lot of times, happen in a room that you're not even present. Probably not at your point in your careers, but going up there, a lot of them, over, I think, 72%. And if you have a sponsor, that means it's someone who may have been a mentor, may have been like just introduced to you briefly, maybe you've networked with them, but it's someone who believes in you, and not only believes in you, but they believe in you so much that they feel that if they help you in the industry or in the company, or etc., that will actually make them even more credible. So they don't feel like they're risking something, but actually, if that works out, if they recommend you, if they champion you, and then you succeed, it will actually even raise their brand. So there's a very direct connection between sponsoring and mentoring, and there are a lot of really interesting articles and essays about sponsoring versus mentoring and what's more effective. So I encourage you to look at it at HBR, Harvard Business Review. There's really, really good content, and also on mentoring in general. And also maybe take a minute or two and think, for my mentees, how can I help them not only with classic mentoring, but also with sponsoring, with job shadowing, with introducing them to other people. I'll take just a second to say, we're all talking about the future of work, right? Such a big, big buzzword, starting like 3 years ago. And I always chuckle when we talk about the future of work, because it's pretty much, it's the present of work already. Yes, we're going to a future of robots and AI and everything, but the present of work is already so different from 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. So in the future of work, or in the present of work, I was going to say people, but it's actually us, right? We treat ourselves and our careers in a very, very, very different way than we used to. Instead of thinking about ourselves as employees who just have to go to work, right? Everybody's talking about how the average period of time in our current place of employment would be 2 years instead of 5, 8, 10 years. But let's put that aside. So we go to work, we get our salary. Hopefully we feel a sense of purpose and meaningfulness, and we enjoy it, and we have a nice boss and a nice team. But that's it. We don't have to work at our career. We work at our job, not in our career. That's no longer true. What used to be, when I was a freelancer and self-employed and a business owner, I knew it's very nice that I'm a cool, talented translator. It's really cool that I'm a good blogger, marketer, influencer, blah, blah, blah. That's nice, but that's not going to make it or break it. What's going to make it or break it, people? That's actually your work at your career. And we're starting to think about ourselves not as an employee, not as an individual inside, the corporate machine, but as a company, right? So we need branding, we need positioning. And by the way, also organizations are getting, okay, you don't have to, they're getting chicken, and they understand we don't only have to market to our clients, we need to market to our employees, but also employees. We need to position ourselves not just when we're looking for a job. When you're polishing your LinkedIn profile, when you're starting to look, and then everybody knows that you're starting to look very stealthily, that's too late. So we know that we need to maintain it. How do we maintain it? We network within the organization and outside of the organization. We maybe invest in some thought leadership. Maybe we even become mentors, and we sort of work on our muscles on leadership, right? By being very generous, we're also learning how we can position ourselves as experts, and that's totally, totally good. That's amazing, because so many other people are benefiting from that. Why not, right? When I'm selling to organizations, a big point of me selling to them is that they're going to be able to identify mentors who maybe are not the most vocal people in meetings, or maybe they're not in their headquarters. And you know how important it's to be in the right location, the right building, right? Even inside a company like Verizon or Facebook, etc. So maybe they're going to be able to identify people who are givers, who are born leaders, that lead in different ways, not necessarily the ancient corporate ladder kind of ways. And that's a great way to position yourself. But if we're thinking about ourselves and about our careers like companies think about themselves, what do companies have? They have an advisory board. That's right. So what we see all the time, and it's amazing how it just works all the time, is that people are no longer looking for just one mentor. Like, I have my go-to mentor, even though I have 5 go-to mentors on different things and different perspectives. But I know that learning and personal and professional growth is not just something that happens in one room or in one situation or once a month or twice a month. That's no longer good enough. I know that learning needs to be self-learning, and it needs to be daily. It needs to be ongoing. And the amazing news are that we now have more resources than ever, right? So we can take a course on Coursera and we can shadow our boss, and then we can also have a mentor on Product League. And maybe our mentor on Product League will also introduce us to another one or two people that specifically will have coffee with us once, or have like a quick chat on WhatsApp, or have a Zoom call or something like that with us. That doesn't mean those mentors are any less meaningful. So that's one thing that I want you to keep in mind, the personal advisory board. And I would love to hear, how does that play into your career? Do you have your advisory board, or do you want to build it? And how do you do that? Another thing I want to touch is, and I sort of mentioned it briefly before, is how much do you wait for your mentee to sort of take, or how, the way we call it at Emerj is the push and pull. Are we waiting for the mentees, are we waiting for them to ask the question? Are we sure that they know what question to ask? How much do we wait for people, our mentees, to ask, to demand, to politely, I hope, demand? And how much do we lead the way? And how can we be sure that we're leading it to the right place? So first of all, again, mentoring is a soft skill. There are no rules set in stone. We talk a lot about best practices with our clients, and they're always very worried about best practices. But if you give people the sort of the rein to give back on their own terms, that always translates to success. So that's one thing. The other thing I mentioned before, and that while mentoring, while giving back, you can actually hone your skills as an expert, your skills as a leader, and also get some visibility and positioning yourself for managerial roles, for leadership roles. So that's the second thing. So now we have some content on best practices. I'm happy to send you some HBR articles that I love. But it's essentially all boils down to listening, again, setting expectations, to really making sure that ego doesn't play a role in the mentoring relationship, because it does happen. And I can tell you personally that it has happened to me once or twice, both as a mentor and as a mentee. And sometimes there's no chemistry. You can't go around it. But you have to be sort of humble and vulnerable enough to say, okay, this is not working, but I would love to introduce you to someone else. Or this is not working, let me tell Maria, and we'll work with someone different. So that's essentially it. But when it comes to what happens in the room, a lot of people don't feel comfortable asking for a favor, asking a very vulnerable and open question, or maybe a daring question about how you dealt with something. I can tell you that I consider myself someone who's so mentorable. Like I am the awkward, precautious kid at 5th grade who would go to the teacher's room instead of the playground and ask teachers to give her advice. So I'm really, really, really into mentorship, and I've always been. But still, when it was time for me, when I actually started founding my startup, it was a really, really vulnerable time for me, because I would, and I was amazed at how generous people were, and how they were willing to meet. But I was sort of building my network while also looking for a lot of advice, because again, it was my third business, but I had no idea on how to build a product. Like I was actually talking to a lot of product leaders, or how to build a team that has not only marketing and business people, but also R&D and product and other stuff. So for me, it was really, really hard to have an ask, a very blunt ask at the end or at the beginning of the meeting. And nowadays as a mentor, I think, wow, that must have been so hard on my mentors, because it's so hard to understand, okay, so what should I do? Should I just spill my knowledge and my experience on you and hope that some of it sticks or that some of it is relevant? But a lot of people are like that. Other people, for example, love asking questions, but maybe they're not the right questions. So my answer, and I'm sorry that there's no clear-cut answer, because again, we're talking about humans, is you need to just take into play all your emotional intelligence and all your experience, and understand that this person did not have to come to you, right? They chose to come to you. They chose you, or the algorithm chose you. But they took also, being a mentee is also a commitment. They took their precious time. They took what they think about themselves and their self-worth and their sort of what they want people around them to think about themselves. And they're going into a very vulnerable situation. And maybe they don't have a lot of experience being mentored. That's also a big thing. A lot of times I meet people who say, oh, I've never had a mentor until this program or that initiative, etc. So definitely think about the push and pull of it. And another thing is, how hard should you be on your mentees, right? Because sometimes there's some harsh truth that needs to be said. Now, I do think that in our day and age, it's a little bit easier, because think about 20 years ago even. It's not so long ago. There's the corporate ladder, the hierarchy. Everyone is very close, very, very sort of protective of their privacy. Nobody should know that they're struggling with something. But now it's not just like the future of work. The future of work did not come out of nowhere. It's also the fact that we are used to social media. And what do we do on social media? Even on a very basic level, we go to New York, so 2 weeks in advance, or in my case, the internal procrastinator, a day in advance, say, hey, I'm going to New York. Who should I meet? Where should I go? Who can help me raise money? Who can help me think about product? So we're very, and it's also started in forums that were anonymous and the whole nickname, and nobody should know my name, etc. But the muscle of being vulnerable and asking for help, even in professional forums, is much more flexed right now. So we are talking about a different point sort of in the evolution of that. But first of all, it's a lot of times generational, but remember that you need to help them. The second thing is really about being harsh sometimes, or sometimes being more cuddly. And it really depends on, first of all, on the personality. You need to understand that your mentee doesn't necessarily share the personality that you have. So don't do it right off the bat. I think that's a given. But also setting expectations. If you come to the meeting, to the first meeting, or even to the fifth, and say, hey, well, yeah, I know that so far we've done this and this, we reviewed this, but I want to just quickly sort of polish why we're doing this. What are your goals? What do you want? What approach do you prefer? Do you prefer for me to really lay it on you and sort of drive the point if that's something that you're struggling with and you're maybe going around in circles? Or do you need more of a support? Because a lot of times people go for a professional support and someone that has been there and can understand. So, but after you've done that, all the tools in your skill set, all the tools in your sort of what you've learned in your own career, what you've learned in managing other people, are legit, as long as you're, a mensch and a person and a human being. So let me just take a quick look. Okay, hi, question. How do we make mentorship official in situations that are not structured as product lead, meaning commitment from both sides? In many cases, we encounter more casual short-term mentors, which we can consult on a regular basis, but are never defined as mentorship. So can it work without really making it official and making a commitment? Okay, great question. Okay, so let me dive into that, and please feel free to like sort of follow up on the chat and say if I've actually hit what you were aiming at or not. Okay, so yeah, I totally relate. I meet a lot of people all the time, both as a mentor and a mentee. And I think you're asked as a mentee, but let me answer it from both sides, where it's like a one-time thing, or maybe it's like sort of alluded to that it might be like a process or a commitment, but maybe after you've met for the first time, there is no chemistry. So there are a lot of things, and you may have met them through a networking thing. Even there's even speed dating for mentors sometimes, at least in the startup world, there's a lot of them. Maybe you've met them on LinkedIn, you reached out, you were very courageous. Or maybe it's just a friend of a friend, and someone made an intro. For me specifically, I had a second meeting today with someone my friend introduced me to, who's very experienced, and also it's very funny. He's like very, very experienced entrepreneur, but he's also starting now a new startup in the field that I'm more experienced at, so enterprise SaaS, learning, etc. So it was really interesting. But I had the second coffee with him today. Within that hour, I think 50 minutes, he made 3 connections for me. I made 2 connections for him. And even what he did, which I really, really liked, was just ask me for permission and take out his phone and make the connections while we were speaking so he doesn't forget. So that was really cool. So now with that person who I met for 2 times, and I learned a lot from him, and I want to learn more from him. And also the people whom he introduced me to, how do I make it official, and is that even important? So I think, is that really important? Really depends on the situation, depends on your needs, also depends on your personality and the other person's personality, and their situation in life. Are they super, super, super busy? Maybe they just decided to leave their organization or go to become self-employed. So the problem is not really sort of putting it into not only commitment, but sort of putting a number on it, because you can assume, you definitely need to set expectations, going back to what we started with, but you can never really, really know. I would say talk more about, really set expectations, and talk more about the sort of the guidelines, sort of the what are the walls within which you can operate. So like all the middle sort of gray things can be okay, but then you get to a black and a white situation. But you need to feel comfortable with that person to feel free to discuss it. And that, I think, is a really good way to also determine if that's the right person for you to be in a mentorship relationship with. So I wouldn't really worry, because sometimes you can really speak with a mentor once a month, and it would be, or just once in a lifetime, it would be a lot. So only if it's someone that you feel will have a lot of value for you in your current stage in your career, or in the next few stages of your career, and you feel like it would be a very, very different situation if you just sporadically, randomly, call them or email them once in a while, or if you really have their guidance and sort of the classic kind of mentorship. And then you need to set expectations. You need to make sure that it works for them as well. It's also, you need to be flexible and understand that what works for them this month might not work for them 6 months from now, if they're having a baby, or they just got like a huge promotion and they're hiring 100 people. But you're human beings, you know how to do that. So you need to be very open and flexible, and yet radical candor. And if you haven't read the book Radical Candor, I'm going to put it in the comments, by Kim Scott. It's an amazing, amazing, amazing book. Let me just quickly type it. It talks a lot about boss, manager and employee situations. But I took from it a lot to just what I I have with my investors, what I have with my advisors and mentors, and yes, also as a boss. But I could not recommend it enough, especially for people who are very polite in nature. Definitely take it into setting expectations. I'm at the stage, I think all of us are like at that stage of a couple times a year at least, where again I'm saying, okay, I thought we set expectations with a person, but a lot of times when you set expectations, that person, whether it's your mentee, your mentor, your boss, your employee, they are not lying. They think that they meet that expectation, or they think that the expectation that they set out for you is what they need. But even if things don't change, sometimes they don't understand. Like they thought that's how it is to work at a startup, but actually it's very different than the corporate. They thought that's how it is to be a mentor, but actually they didn't think about all the emails beyond the meeting. And you need to think as a mentor, do I want to allow it? Do I want to encourage it? Do I think that's actually more effective and maybe it fits my personality more? Or maybe, no, I can't. Even the 1 hour a week or a month is a lot for me. So when setting expectations, ask yourself hard questions, be radically candid with yourself, but also feel free to ask them to the other person, or even if you don't want to be as blunt, just bring it up and say, in my experience, I know that actually a lot of people like to chat beyond the 1 hour session. Or in my experience, I saw that actually a lot of times you don't have questions. So this is what I expect. I expect you to maybe I like, being on WhatsApp with you, or I expect you to read some of the material of the topics that we will discuss. It's all okay. Like there's no wrong answer. You just need to make sure. It's better to make sure in the beginning. And again, it's a cliche. It's not anything that I'm telling you that's new, but it's better to make sure in the beginning that you're a good fit, even if it's a little bit awkward, than being in a complicated thing later. And even when you're in a complicated thing later, read Radical Candor. I could not recommend it enough. Okay. Any more questions? And Judy, did I answer the question at all? Because I tend to go off on a tangent now and again. So let me know in the chat. Okay, thank you. You're welcome. Let me see. Maria, did I leave out anything from what we said? Do we want to open up to questions?
I think, first of all, it's super interesting and it's spot on. It's exactly what we talked about. And to me, I think this is what the mentors are looking for in terms of this webinar. So thank you. Happy to have you here with us. I think it is a great opportunity to open it for discussion. So let's try to ask the mentors for either subjects or issues they want to discuss. And let's continue from there. So mentors, this is your time to be on stage. What is it that you would like to ask Chedva?
And yeah, even if you don't want to go super deep into a question, feel free to just write a subject or a topic. It's always a good starting point.
You know what? I have a question myself.
Sure.
I would like myself to jump in and ask one. When can a mentor realize that they do a good job? Like, are there any signs, except for the obvious one, when the better health is coming and saying, hey, that was life-changing, that was amazing, except for that scenario? When can a mentor know that they are on the right path to bring value to the other person?
That is such a spot-on question, Malia. So I think, as you said, when someone tells you, like, compliments you and says it's life-changing, you can never know, because maybe that person is really enthusiastic or really, really polite, or maybe they even think that it's life-changing now and it will end up being bad advice, right? Like that's one of the more frustrating things with people, that sometimes we're not really measurable creatures. But I will say, when you start seeing your mentee saying things that you've said a few months or weeks ago, and saying it like it's their own idea, or even like if they encourage, like they acknowledge that it's your idea, but they are owning it, that's a really, really good sign. Another thing is, ask them, how was their week? What are their challenges? Like beyond just their question. By the way, this is a really good tactic to sort of pull out of them what is their need right now, if they're not coming with a question or with an ask, right? So ask them about their week, their challenges. Who are they dealing with people-wise? Like not necessarily a name, but what are the personas? What are the things on their table that are taking a lot of their headspace? And week after week, when you start seeing them telling you about their week or their month, it doesn't depend on the time span, and they're telling you about their week or about how they dealt with a specific situation, and you see that they actually have taken a tool or a tactic or something, or even a phrase that you used, and implemented and applied it to that situation, that's amazing. That's a mind shift. I can tell you from a situation when where I was the mentee, I had a very hard time with myself. I was a manager in the last 10 years, but I was managing people who did marketing, which is something that I feel very, very, very comfortable with. And when I started Emerj, it was very, very hard for me to manage people who are coding, who are creating algorithms, who are like, I was the product person, so to speak, and I did not have any experience with products. Like, you know, product is so broad. You can say that if I was, you know, I built websites and stuff like that, but really I did not have that experience. It was really hard for me to say, hey, I said to myself, hey, I don't have experience. Why should those people even listen to me? How do I know to judge if their code, if the product is good or bad? It was a really tough situation. And I had a mentor there then, who was also a coach, by the way, which we can also dive into what's the difference between mentors and coaches in a minute, if it's interesting to anyone. And she said, she was like, yeah, but you can do it, you can do it. But that wasn't really, you know, we can say like empowerment phrases all the time, but she actually told me, like, look into what you did do. Look at like starting 2 companies from scratch, stuff like that. And then I had a situation where there was a technology glitch. There was a big bug like that we couldn't overcome. I don't know if I would even call it a bug. It was just like a hurdle that we couldn't overcome, and we needed that feature was super, super, super crucial for our product. And I found myself sort of interviewing the 2 engineers, like in the front end and the service side, and the designer, and where the gaps were, and me coming from like the client side, like the marketing side, who's talking with the client. And then I came up with a solution that was not even technology related. And I said, hey, actually everything that I bring to the table, which was worthless to my, like, I was like, why did I even think I could start a company? It actually has some value. And that was such a powerful moment for me that I still go back to it when we have like, you know, differences of opinions, or just even a hurdle, like even a technology hurdle that we need to ship. We need to find a solution to a technological problem, and we need to deliver a stat, and sometimes the API doesn't work or whatever. Creativity is not does not depend on years of experience, even though it really helps. It does not depend on you know, technological or scientific knowledge. But that point I'm making, because that was exactly me going from, yeah, I know I'm talented, I'm okay. Like, I don't need to have imposter syndrome, to actually applying it to the situation at the moment. And I'm sure for my mentor at that point, that was the moment she said, okay, this is actually going somewhere. So a lot of times you don't have that privilege, but look for those things. Ask the questions, interview your mentee, because you will find, first of all, where you can help them and where you maybe need to push a little and to squeeze a little, because a lot of times those places are not happy and easy buttons to push. Sometimes those buttons are exactly where they actually need the help. And ask them, can I go there? Is it okay? Do you feel comfortable? Is that actually what you need? Or maybe it's besides the point and we're just opening up Pandora box. So I hope, Maria, that I answered your question. I see we have 2 more questions. Yay. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. And let's move on to the class question and Daniel one.
Awesome. So Dikla asked if you can go over the differences, I'm guessing, between mentoring and coaching. That would be great. Awesome. That's a question I get asked a lot, especially since, I don't know if you know, and by the way, it's a good thing to know. Let me put it in the chat box. There's a really cool startup called BetterUp. BetterUp is a startup that connects people. I don't think only employees inside large organizations, but maybe to coaches. It's very much, I don't know if you know, it's like an app where they find you an executive coach and you do the entire coaching mechanism, the entire process through your phone. And it's really cool. Just like they have Talkspace for therapy. So we get asked that a lot. So mentoring, coaching and mentoring are both very, 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 very overused words, right, everybody? So it's hard to tell a lot of times, because anyone calls themselves a mentor or a coach, when a lot of times they just want to make themselves a guru, right? So real coaches are people who went to school for coaching. It's not, you don't go to school as much, like for as long as for therapy, but it's actually a methodology that there are a few different methodologies, but it's a methodology of how you bring a person from point A to point B. We review their goals, we review the problem, and we want to have a few steps, 3 steps, 12 steps, whatever, to get to a solution. Just like in therapy, you'll have CBT, cognitive behavioral. So you want to see a change, you want to see progress, and in a framed, in a time frame that you define. So it's very much, it has a beginning and an end, and sometimes you then begin again for another process or for another solution, but it is very methodological. Real coaches go to school for that, depending on what they believe for a different period of time, to different number of schools maybe, and methodologies. And that's a very serious thing. If you go and become a coach without having the knowledge and the experience to back it up, that is not a good thing. And I know a lot of companies even call mentoring coaching, but that's a confusion that exists out there. Mentors, on the other hand, are just people like you and me who've had experience in the same industry or just in the same department, or like you. And it might be someone who's much more experienced and much older than you. It might be peer-to-peer, so it might be someone on the same level, and there's a lot of value to be given actually for someone who really understands not only the generation, but also understands what you're going through, but maybe has more experience in a specific point of what you're going through. And it can even be someone younger, someone less experienced. We call it reverse mentoring. And we see it a lot actually now with the future of work. A lot of people who are more senior go to younger people to understand how a lot of situations in work are working, because to negotiate with someone, even nowadays, is a little bit different. Even if it's something tried and true like enterprise sales, the expectations we have from someone else, the culture changes, the friendliness, the warmness, the warmth is very different. So a lot of times people go for reverse mentoring either to understand how to deal with changes in the workplace and the culture, or even to understand, okay, my client maybe the age of my little sister, so maybe I need to go to someone their age to get advice. So mentoring is much more flexible, it's much more open. That's why it's so hard to come up with best practices, because there's a lot of wiggle room, and that's why on the one hand it's amazing, it's really, really cool. It doesn't have to be a 6-month thing, but on the other hand, it can really use sometimes some more structure, like we said, maybe setting expectations, understanding the needs and the circumstances of each other. So I hope that answered that. Okay, I think we have 2 more questions. Hi, Chedva. Hi, Danielle. What's the most common mentoring mistake you can think of from your experience as a mentor and as a mentee? Thanks, Dikla. Okay, great question. I think there's a lot of mistakes, but the good thing is we're dealing with people and we can always go swing back, right? So definitely setting expectations, and not setting expectations only once, but sort of on an ongoing basis, not to be a nag, but every time you sense that there's a shift or something like that. I think one big mistake, and I'm gonna oppose myself in a second, is for us as mentees to feel a lot of times as nags. Like, I don't want to take too much of the time. I don't want to take, I don't want to ask for too much. But actually, mentors a lot of times crave those questions, crave that directness. So definitely within the sort of guidelines of the expectations that you set, definitely be that. On the other hand, I think as mentors, sometimes we are very busy. It's very hard to commit, and sometimes we overstretch ourselves. I definitely do as a mentor and as a lot of different things. So sort of learn for, like, set expectations with yourself. Be radically candid with yourself. But even if you don't necessarily know how much time and effort, and even more than the time and effort, just the brain space it will take. So constantly ask yourself, am I up to this? Do I want to really take 3, 5, 10 mentees at a time? Or maybe I'm good with one for the time being. I do a lot of mentoring and volunteering. I love it. I feel that it fills me with so much joy, and actually learn a lot of things, because when you say things and you get them sort of reflected back, that really hones things in. But sometimes you need to take a step back. And I think for people like us who are mentors, who are givers in their nature, sometimes it's even harder than actually committing. So definitely that. And, someone is being vulnerable with you. Someone is really trusting you. The biggest mistake, which I don't think anybody in this webinar ever does, but I just have to say it, would be, misusing their trust. You can never do that. Even if it's like just an anecdote or something like that, that is the most sacred thing. And if you can't, just don't go there. Don't do it. It's not worth it. It's the most sacred thing, that someone is opening up and being vulnerable and willing to really learn and really listen and put themselves in a position that in our culture sometimes seems as weakness. We always talk about the sacrifice and the generosity of the mentors, and that's true, but it's not easy to be on the other side. So respect it, okay? Even when you're being hard for a purpose, or even when you say, oh, I've done it so many times, why is such an issue? Respect that. And if you can't respect it, maybe you're not the best fit for that specific mentee, and you need to look for a different, sort of chemistry. Okay, I hope I answered that. And we have another question. Thank you, Danielle. An insight. I think that if one of the volunteers to be a mentor, we should be all in for his or her mentee. If you don't think you can, no one is forcing you. Yeah, Uri, I think that is a really, really good insight. But I do think all in is very different things for different people. So for someone, all in would be, dedicating a lot of time for a specific call or a meeting with their mentee. And for someone else, it might be not meeting as much, but being very available and emotionally available for them throughout. That immediately after a meeting, they can, text you, and you can sort of revert back and forth. So like in my personality, like it's easier for me than actually scheduling meetings. So part of setting expectations should definitely be what all in means for the mentor and what does it mean for the mentee, because if you have a very different picture of what it looks like, it might not work. Okay.
Great, Chedva, I actually have another question. I would let myself jump in. We just discussed opportunities and what may go wrong, and mistakes, and should we be all in, or what is all in? And let's take a scenario when you're all in, but things are just hard because you have a day job, you have family, you have your hobbies. Hopefully, you have some time for that. You have some time for yourself. Exactly, I said hopefully. I said hopefully. What are the tricks of the trade as a mentor when things are getting hard on you? What, like, either reminders, either like sentences or stuff that you should remind yourself, or some exercises, some yoga for the soul, if you will, that mentors can apply to their life when they find themselves in a situation where they say, I know why I'm in. I know that I'm going to be full in. I just need to remind myself one way or another why it's worth it, how to overcome the challenge of not finding enough time for everything, and the day-to-day of being a mentor.
Yeah, totally. I think we've all been there. Unless someone is a superhuman, and then I want to be your mentee and learn everything about it. Yeah, I think there are two situations that I'm very familiar with, both from myself and from the mentors that we see every day. One is sometimes actually when things are hard and things are overstretched, sometimes you get a lot of joy and a lot of fulfillment, and a lot of actually like sort of you get filled up by being a mentor. That's really good. And it's the same people. It doesn't happen to different people, but sometimes you're just so overstretched, you're spread so thin, and you just it does not happen for you, and you find yourself inside mentoring sessions half listening, waiting for the session to end. And it's so bad because we're so angry at ourselves, right? Even if the other person does not understand it. And by the way, I have to say some of my more successful mentorship sessions were when I was a little bit, my attention span was not running that, was running a little short, and I had a hard day, and that made me a little bit more sort of direct. So I felt really, really bad with my self, but sometimes the mentee felt really good, like that was actually what they needed. But that doesn't mean that it's, always good. So that happens. And I think, first of all, you have to be so radically honest with yourself. I'm sorry for like drilling that, but you have to know that you have your barriers. You're just a human being. You're just one person. And even if you're not overstretched, but you want time for yoga or for your whatever, for sewing your kids a Purim costume, that's okay. That's your time. And if you're not, if you find yourself dreading that mentoring session, it's not a good time to do it. So definitely, that's why I said, don't only set expectations in the beginning, always be setting the expectations again and again, not only with the mentee, but also with yourself. Also, if there's a mentoring program, you have to do it all the time, and you have to know when to take a step back, because otherwise you'll get burned, and it will be very hard for you to come back with new energy. So that's one thing. The other thing is find what fills you up. Every mentor, like in our platform that we've built on our ideas of mentorship, every mentor is also a mentee. Like they're automatically a mentee, but they have to really actively choose to be a mentor. And that goes back to psychology, right? To therapy. Every therapist is required to have a supervisor, which is like a sort of an advisor. My mom is a therapist, and she has 3 different supervisors. And she says she would not have been able to survive without them. So find yourself either an advisor, a mentor, or something else, and or understand what does fill you. If maybe you don't have even the capacity to go to a mentor right now, or the time. I would encourage you to make time, but or even just the brain space. So think, what helps you? Is that reading books about leadership or about your material, like product or something like that? Is that watching silly movies on YouTube, or actually watching TED Talks or keynotes? Is that going to retreats or conferences? Just as a human being, make sure that you're being nourished, because if you don't have what to give, it will be translated into what you're trying to give. You would feel like you're falling short. Again, maybe you're not falling short, but you would feel so bad with yourself. And that's not something that we want out of mentors. Mentors are amazing. You're rock stars. You need to be celebrated. So if that makes you feel bad or burnt out for a while, just take a step back, or not, but nourish yourself. Make sure that you have the inspiration you need to actually be giving back. We are not, we are not bottomless wells of inspiration, of energy. We need to feed off something. And I think most of us as mentors are people who feed off and get energy from also giving back, but sometimes it's not enough. So make sure you know where you are on that scale at every given moment.
One more point we should mention, something that you mentioned before, is just a reminder that this, hopefully, if done right, gonna help your own career.
Definitely. I think that's something that's sort of a dirty secret. We don't want to to admit that we're doing something to benefit our own career. But first of all, a lot of times we don't do it for that, but that's a benefit. But also, it's okay if, in order to benefit your own career and to prove to your boss or to prove to yourself that you can be on the leadership side, that you can be on the expert side, you're doing that. It's amazing, because you're benefiting, but also someone else, your mentee, is benefiting. A way to structure that is really, if you have a mentoring program at your workplace, or a mentoring program in your industry that's an industry leader, a lot of times they will even, they will brand it, they will position it, they will celebrate their mentors. And that's a great way to then, if you're a freelancer or self-employed, you can use it for marketing, and then you're also marketing that initiative, and it's amazing. If you're inside the organization, you can go in the performance review to your manager and say, hey, these are the things that I learned from my experience as a mentor to so-and-so people, not so-and-so names, but so-and-so like number of people. And I believe that with that experience now, and with my own experience, I can actually now take more responsibility on leading a bigger team, or I can actually head an initiative or give a talk on what I've learned. And you can really, really use it as a jumping point. For everyone, it's it's a little bit different depending on their place in their career and their place in the specific culture and sort of vibe of the organization. But you should know that HR, and even more than that, the leaders of the companies, the CEOs, the C-level, they're looking for people who take initiative. They're looking for people who are givers, not takers. And by the way, the book Give and Take by Adam Grant, which you probably already read, or his TED Talk on the same subject, is amazing to read or to consume. It used to be the corporate ladder was the people who could grab anything and like run for their lives. But actually, when you look at even historically, the really celebrated leaders, it's the people who could not take energy, not even give energy to people, but actually unleash the energy of the people who report to them. And that's a sort of misquoted quote by the CEO of Unilever. So it's also big corporates that think like that. So if companies, if your leadership can get a proof that you're doing that in some capacity, or even not a proof, but a proof that you're trying, that it's something that interests you, that's a huge, huge, huge indication for them that you can be in the leadership track. So don't be afraid, and see how you can leverage it, whether inside your organization, whether for keynote or speaking opportunities, whether it is just showcasing how you can manage more people and how you can manage more than, because what do people look for in managers? They don't only look for, and also what leadership looks for in management. They don't only look for someone who can overstretch the productivity of the team, even though, yes, if we can get more code lines or business results, that would be amazing. But they actually look for someone who people would be inspired to follow, who people would love to come to work for, right? Who people would come and feel meaningful, meaningless when they come to work, because 59% of millennials value opportunities for learning and professional growth over salary. So if you can be that manager, and if you're a mentor, you probably can be that manager. That's a huge, huge, huge benefit for your organization. So definitely use that.
One of the things we practically do to get a conversation started between mentors and mentees is that we give them books. Each one gets a copy of a book they select from a pile of books, and one of the books we offer them is Give and Take, and the reason for that is exactly that, because
I love it.
The thing is, it's not just about code, it's not just about numbers, it's about the atmosphere you create about you and around yourself at work, with friends, and on the mentorship that you provide. And if you are positioning yourself both on board with others and with yourself as how you feel about yourself as a giver, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. This is something I'm so proud to say that all the mentors at Product League, they share this enthusiasm of just to give back the opportunity that we all didn't have when we started in the product world. So this is actually what stands behind Product League. I think unless we have more questions from the audience, this may be a good time for just summarizing, just mentioning the important notes and tips you mentioned on this session, to summarize it and just give us the energy needed for tomorrow morning, going to the office, making a phone call to our mentees, and making this whole opportunity even bigger and better. So unless we have more questions,
do we have more questions? Okay. If you have, please type away. So first of all, I love what you're doing with the books. I'm a big bookworm. And I think even if you don't read all the book through, you just flip through it. It's someone who's thought about leadership. It's someone who was in your own, position. And you just get so much inspiration, even if we're just reading a page. One quote that I love, and I've heard it from many different sources, so I don't know who to attribute it to. So take it or leave it. But it was said about women, but I think it's about everyone. Just like you said, Moria, when we've had an opportunity, or even if we struggled all the way to the top and nobody gave it to us, it's our responsibility to then send the elevator back to the ground floor so someone else could take that elevator. And maybe for them it's easier, maybe it's faster, maybe they make their own mistakes, but not our mistakes. So I love it. I think it's so much of what I believe in. And let's start summarizing. So and Maria, feel free to jump in, and anyone in the chat if I'm missing anything. I think one of the things what we set out about talking about what is mentoring, and then we revisited with what is mentoring versus what is coaching. We spoke about sponsorship. We spoke about job shadowing, different types and forms of giving back and knowledge sharing, and what could be effective in different situations, right? We talked about time restriction. Is it the quality or the quantity, right? What's the impact of what you say, and how can you guess what would have the best impact? How can you measure success? Can you even measure it, right? Probably not, but can you really feel it? Can you sense it? We spoke about the mentors' careers and how we struggle with being very busy, but also how we can actually take our experience with mentorship into practicing it as bosses, as managers, or as people who want to show that they can have a leadership track into their career. We spoke about setting expectations, and that I feel was a very, very big theme tonight. Setting expectations and be radically candid with ourselves, with each other, with the programs that we commit to. And what is that commitment? How does it look like? Do we give and sort of spill the knowledge, or do we wait to be asked? And if people don't ask us, if the mentees don't ask and have like a very clear question or favor, how do we sort of structure, okay, how do we extract from them what are their needs? How do we actually interview them? And from between the lines also understand what are the needs, what are the challenges, what are the things I think maybe that person doesn't even know yet that it's a challenge, but I think they need to be steered to that direction. How direct are we? How do we use our emotional intelligence? And I think that's pretty much sums it up. I think we also spoke a lot about why people don't necessarily need their bosses as mentors, or even if their boss is a mentor, they also need additional mentors. We spoke about the advisory board kind of approach, how we manage our careers like a company. And that goes back to also to the mentors who need to position themselves. And I think that's it, unless I forgot something. It was really, really, really great speaking to all of you guys, and I hope you'll have a great night and wake up with a lot of energy towards your own careers and towards the careers of your mentees. I can't applaud you enough for dedicating your time and energy to doing this. You are amazing, and you're amazing, Moria, for putting it all together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chedva Kleinhandler, CEO and co-founder of Emerj, for joining us tonight, for sharing your experience, tips, everything you've learned, not only on your own startup that provides the opportunity for companies to have a platform for mentoring, but also from your own experience, both as a mentor and as a mentee. So thank you very much. A recorded version of this webinar will be available soon, as I told you previously, and we will share it on our website and social media. Dear mentors, thank you very much for joining us on this webinar. I hope you enjoy it and learn as much as I did. Looking forward for the next one, and that's it. Thank you very much, Chedva. Toda rabah. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.